Let's think about a story called Cop Disrespects Elderly Man at Stop, 7 minutes later, regrets it after learning the truth. It's going to be about 25 minutes long, so we need to make sure there's enough to keep everyone interested. We want to write it so that kids in the 4th grade can easily understand what's going on. First, we will think about what are the most important points we want to talk about. We need to know the main things that happen in the story, so we can make sure we don't miss anything important when we start writing it all out. The story should be fun and teach a good lesson about respecting others. Now, let's meet Officer Miller. He wasn't a bad guy, not really. He was just young and a little too proud. He wanted everyone to see him as a great police officer. He thought that meant being tough and showing people who was in charge. Officer Miller was new to the town. He'd only been on the force for about a year. He wanted to make a good impression on his boss, Sergeant Davis. He figured catching some bad guys would be the best way to do that. So, he was always on the lookout, eager to prove himself. He sometimes jumped to conclusions a little too quickly. He believed he had a special talent for spotting trouble, even when it wasn't really there. It was a beautiful morning in Harmony Creek. The sun was shining, and birds were singing their cheerful songs. Mrs. Gable was watering her prize-winning roses, and Mr. Henderson was walking his fluffy white dog, Sparky. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted from Mrs. Peterson's bakery, making everyone's tummy rumble. Even Officer Miller felt a little lighter that morning. He drove down Main Street, waving to some of the kids on their way to school. Harmony Creek was usually quiet, not much exciting ever happened. But Officer Miller still hoped something interesting would come along, something that would show everyone he was a real hero. He just didn't know what was about to happen next. Suddenly, Officer Miller spotted it, a rusty, old car sputtering down the road. It looked like it was about to fall apart. The driver was an elderly man, his hair as white as snow. He was driving very slowly, maybe a little too slowly. Aha, thought Officer Miller. Here's my chance. He flipped on his lights and siren. The old car slowly pulled over to the side of the road. Officer Miller felt a surge of excitement. He imagined Sergeant Davis patting him on the back, saying, "Good work, Miller. You're a real asset to this force." He straightened his uniform and puffed out his chest, ready to show this slowpoke who was boss. Officer Miller strolled towards the car, a slight smirk on his face. He already knew what he was going to say. "License and registration, please," he'd say in his most official voice. He figured this would be an easy stop. Just a slow old man who needed to be reminded to drive a little faster. He tapped lightly on the driver's side window. The elderly man looked up, his eyes a little wide. Officer Miller couldn't help but think, "Yep, just as I suspected. Probably can barely see over the steering wheel." He was ready to give the man a lecture about safe driving, even before he knew what was really going on. His mind was already made up. "Good morning, officer," the elderly man said, his voice a little shaky. "Lovely day, isn't it?" He started rummaging through his glove compartment, his hands trembling slightly. "Now, where did I put those papers?" He pulled out a map, some old receipts, and a pair of sunglasses. "Oh dear," he mumbled, "I seem to be a bit disorganized today." He patted his pockets, then checked the visor above his head. Officer Miller tapped his foot impatiently. This was taking longer than he expected. He could feel his easy stop turning into a frustrating delay. He just wanted to get this over with. "Sir," Officer Miller said, his voice sharper now, "are you aware that you're holding up traffic? I don't have all day. Could you please just find your license and registration?" He rolled his eyes slightly, hoping the man would notice. "I'm trying, officer, I'm trying," the elderly man replied, his voice tinged with worry. "I just can't seem to locate them at the moment." Officer Miller sighed loudly. "You know, it's a legal requirement to have those documents with you when you're driving. You're wasting my time, and frankly, it's against the law." He leaned closer to the window, his face stern. "Are you sure you should even be behind the wheel?" "Oh, here they are," the elderly man exclaimed, finally pulling out a worn leather wallet. He carefully extracted his driver's license and registration and handed them to Officer Miller. Officer Miller snatched the documents, barely glancing at them. He noticed the man's date of birth right away. Wow, he thought, this guy is ancient. He flipped through the registration quickly, not really paying attention to the details. His focus was solely on the man's age. He figured that was all he needed to know. Old people shouldn't be driving anyway, he grumbled to himself. Officer Miller decided to let the man off with a warning. He couldn't really find anything seriously wrong, just a slightly expired registration sticker. "Okay, sir," he said, handing back the documents, "I'm going to give you a warning this time for the expired registration. But you need to get that taken care of immediately." He paused, then added, "And maybe consider if you're really up to driving anymore. You're not getting any younger, you know." He gave a patronizing little smile. "Drive safely. If you can." He walked back to his patrol car, feeling like he'd done his duty. He'd shown that old-timer who was in charge. The elderly man simply nodded, his face still calm. "Thank you, officer," he said quietly. "I'll take care of that registration right away." He didn't argue, he didn't complain, he didn't even seem angry. He just remained polite and respectful, despite Officer Miller's rude behavior. As Officer Miller walked away, the elderly man gave a small sigh and carefully put his car in gear. He drove off slowly, minding his own business. He didn't let Officer Miller's attitude ruin his day. He had more important things to worry about. He was headed to the town hall for a very special occasion. Back in his patrol car, Officer Miller felt a surge of satisfaction. He'd shown that old man who was boss. He chuckled to himself, thinking he'd taught him a valuable lesson. "These slow drivers need to learn to keep up," he muttered. He patted himself on the back, imagining Sergeant Davis saying, "Miller, you're doing a great job keeping our streets safe." He felt important and powerful. He was ready for his next big challenge. Little did he know, his next big challenge was about to turn his self-satisfied grin upside down. And it would happen in less than 10 minutes. Just as the elderly man's car disappeared around the corner, Officer Miller's radio buzzed to life. "Attention all units," the dispatcher announced. "The town is holding an award ceremony at the town hall this morning to honor a local hero." Officer Miller listened with half an ear. He wasn't really interested in award ceremonies. "The ceremony is scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, the dispatcher continued. "All available officers are encouraged to attend and show their support." Officer Miller yawned. Award ceremonies were boring. He'd rather be out catching real criminals. The dispatcher then started reading a short biography of the hero. "Today, we honor Mr. Elderly Man's last name," the dispatcher announced, "a retired veteran of the war name, war. Mr. Elderly Man's last name served with distinction, saving the lives of countless soldiers during a daring rescue mission behind enemy lines." Officer Miller perked up a little. A war hero? That was kind of interesting. He still wasn't thrilled about attending an award ceremony, but the story sounded a little more exciting now. He wondered what the old guy had done. He continued to listen, but still wasn't fully paying attention. Old war stories, Officer Miller scoffed under his breath. Big deal. That was ages ago. What has he done lately? He thought about all the criminals he could be catching right now, the real work of keeping Harmony Creek safe. Saving lives in some old war didn't seem as important as stopping a robbery or catching a speeding car. He adjusted his rearview mirror, checking his hair. He believed that being a police officer now was much more challenging than anything someone did in the past. The world had changed, and so had the definition of a hero, he thought. Just then, another officer, Officer Jones, chimed in on the radio. "Hey, I know Mr. Elderly Man's last name. He's a great guy. My grandpa told me all about his bravery." Officer Miller barely registered the comment until Officer Jones added, "Yeah, he lived right here in Harmony Creek. Always helps out at the community center. Real stand-up citizen, that Mr. Elderly Man's last name. Suddenly, a cold feeling washed over Officer Miller. Mr. Elderly Man's last name. Where had he heard that name before? It clicked. That was the name of the elderly man he had just pulled over. Officer Miller's heart pounded in his chest. He felt a wave of heat rush to his face, followed by a chilling realization of what he had done. He had been so rude, so disrespectful, to a war hero, a man who had risked his life to save others. A pang of guilt shot through him. He remembered the elderly man's calm demeanor, his quiet politeness, even in the face of Officer Miller's arrogance. How could he have been so quick to judge? He suddenly felt very small and ashamed. He now felt guilty. He frantically rummaged through his glove compartment, his hands shaking. He pulled out the registration he'd taken from the elderly man. His eyes darted to the name. Elderly man's first name, elderly man's last name. It was the same name. No doubt about it. The elderly man he had just treated so poorly was the war hero being honored at the town hall. The man he dismissed as just another slow old driver was a true hero, a legend in Harmony Creek. He had to find him. He had to apologize. The weight of his mistake crashed down on Officer Miller. This wasn't just some slow old driver. This was a highly decorated war hero, a man who had been awarded medals for his bravery and sacrifice. This was a pillar of the Harmony Creek community, someone everyone looked up to and respected. And he, Officer Miller, had treated him like dirt. He imagined the stories the elderly man could tell, the lives he had saved, the sacrifices he had made. And all Officer Miller could think about was an expired registration sticker. He felt sick to his stomach. He knew he had to make things right. Overcome with regret, Officer Miller knew he had to do something. He couldn't just let this go. He had to apologize, to try to make amends for his disrespectful behavior. It was the only right thing to do. He started his patrol car and sped towards the town hall, his mind racing. What would he say? How could he possibly explain his actions? He knew an apology wouldn't erase what he'd done, but it was a start. He hoped the elderly man would even be willing to listen to him. He had to try. He had to apologize. He pushed the speed limit, weaving through the streets of Harmony Creek. He hoped he could catch Mr. Elderly Man's last name before the ceremony started. He imagined the man already inside, surrounded by people, receiving accolades. The thought of interrupting the ceremony made him even more nervous, but he knew he had to try. He parked his patrol car haphazardly, jumping out and running towards the town hall entrance. Every second counted. He hoped he wasn't too late. He had to catch him before the award ceremony. He burst through the doors of the town hall and stopped short. There, in the center of the room, surrounded by flashing cameras and smiling faces, was Mr. Elderly Man's last name. He was being greeted by the mayor, shaking hands with other important-looking people in suits. Officer Miller watched in disbelief. The elderly man looked so different now, standing tall and proud, beaming with joy. He was no longer just a slow old driver. He was a hero, a respected member of the community, a man worthy of everyone's admiration. And Officer Miller had treated him so badly. His stomach churned. Officer Miller hesitated. He felt a wave of shame wash over him. How could he possibly approach this man, surrounded by so much admiration, and admit what he had done? His earlier arrogance seemed ridiculous now. He hung back near the entrance, watching Mr. Elderly Man's last name. Every step he took towards the elderly man felt heavier than the last. He wondered if he should just leave, pretend this never happened. But he knew he couldn't. He had to face the consequences of his actions. He was still feeling ashamed. Taking a deep breath, Officer Miller walked towards the group. As he got closer, Mr. Elderly Man's last name's eyes met his. A flicker of recognition crossed the elderly man's face. He remembered. Officer Miller felt his face flush. He stopped a few feet away, feeling awkward and out of place. He was about to speak when the mayor turned to him, a puzzled expression on his face. All eyes were now on Officer Miller. He had to say something, and fast. The elderly man now recognized him. "Mr. Elderly man's last name," Officer Miller said, his voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, his eyes filled with sincerity. I wanted to apologize. I was completely out of line earlier. I had no idea who you were, and that's no excuse for my behavior. I was disrespectful, and I am truly sorry." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I judged you based on your age and the way your car looked, and that was wrong. You deserve so much more respect, especially after everything you've done for this town and for our country. I am deeply ashamed." He hoped his apology was accepted. Mr. Elderly man's last name smiled kindly. "Officer," he said, his voice warm and forgiving, "thank you for apologizing. I appreciate that. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when they are young. The important thing is that you learn from them." He extended his hand, and Officer Miller shook it firmly. "I assure you, sir," Officer Miller said, "I will never make that mistake again. I have learned a valuable lesson today." He finally felt a sense of relief wash over him. The elderly man accepted his apology. From that day forward, Officer Miller was a changed man. He learned a valuable lesson about judging people. He realized that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their age, their appearance, or the kind of car they drive. He understood that true heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and it's important to treat everyone with kindness and understanding. He became known as a kind and compassionate officer, always willing to lend a helping hand. He even visited Mr. Elderly man's last name regularly, listening to his stories and learning from his wisdom. And he finally understood what it truly meant to serve and protect, not just the law, but the people of Harmony Creek.